Chapter 3, Gas to Floor. A billion-dollar plan. So, our company began with the sale of advertising space in the press and Begun, which, let me remind you, was the name of the contextual advertising network on the Rambler site. Who has forgotten? This is a search engine that once competed with Yandex. Then, Yandex itself was added. Then a client, Moscow Credit Bank, ordered souvenir products from us, pens, notepads, calendars. The company had no experience in this segment, but you don't think that stopped us, do you? This is exactly what we wanted. Together with the team we figured out how everything worked, got into all the nuances and fulfilled the bank's request. Although not without difficulty, I must be honest. Imagine this, a manufacturer sends us a batch of pens. We rejoice like children, it's on. And then someone gets the idea to test them. And it is absolutely necessary to test the pens. After all, sales representatives of companies will give them to customers, everything must work. Think about it, you buy a car, they give you a pen and it doesn't write. I'm sure you'll immediately think, maybe the car these people sold me won't go far either. We run the pen over the paper, and horror, black paste. And the client wanted blue, strictly speaking. And what to do now? Send the batch back. But the customer expects the result today. Mute scene, almost like Gogol's, is interrupted when a saving thought occurs to us. We run to the stationery stores, buy 10,000 quality blue rods, check each of them, with our own hands, can you imagine? And then the secretary, 3 managers and I in 10 hands untwist these pens, insert new rods and only then with a clear conscience give the order to the customer. The customer, as it should be, was satisfied. This is how new directions are born. Not without problems, but something to remember, right? After that order we began to offer souvenir products and printing to other clients. Furthermore, one day one of the clients asked if we were engaged in advertising in electric trains. Oh, and this is an idea. And how did we not think of it ourselves? The rest, a matter of technique, to find out information about this sphere, to make a special section on the site, to conclude a contract with Lysa, the exclusive operator of Russian railways. Voila, another new direction. So it usually went something like this. Clients approached us with a specific request that was unusual for us. We thoroughly understood the segment, analyzed the market, and fulfilled the order. And then we expanded the range of our services by means of a new direction, which we mastered in combat conditions, and offered other clients to try it themselves. Of course, it is always easier to turn down opportunities, but why? It may sound loud, but I am convinced that such an approach is not in the spirit of Medor Agency. We want everything different and more, and then, it is logical. At the time of writing this book we provide a full cycle of services for the client in the format 360, from the development of positioning strategy and creation of platforms for generating applications, websites, applications, lendings, to ensuring the flow of quality clients through internet promotion, social media, placement on television and radio. With a clear hit in the target audience, up to the subsequent post-advertising analysis. We also help the client to work on reputation. We do not hesitate to perform work on procurement, media planning, internal and external marketing. If the customer remains dissatisfied with the output from advertising, for example, on transport, for some reason will be low return, there is a significant chance that additionally ordered promotional video will shoot and bring a lot of orders. Another client, on the contrary, will not appreciate the radio advertising, but he will like the result of a coherent and distributed to the target audience advertising catalog. That is, offering people a wide range of services, we protect ourselves from possible negativity, and those who come to us, from the risks of, put on the wrong horse. If one thing doesn't work, another will. It is also important that quality work in several areas strengthens our reputation. Potential clients see that we are a full-service agency, not a small, narrowly focused company. And not only they notice this, by the way, but also our potential employees. The bigger the company, the more trust applicants have in it, the more useful things they can learn from it. In short, we are doing a lot of things today, thanks to our customers. Although this is not the only way in which Medor's lineup of new areas can be expanded. We have an employee motivation system designed for this. If you develop a service yourself, sell it, you get 7% of the margin for a whole year. And the manager who leads the project, who took the initiative himself, gets 20 or 25%, or even 30%, depending on the complexity. This is an opportunity for team members to earn serious money, and many of them take advantage of it. Of course, just having a bright idea is not enough. An employee needs to write a roadmap, calculate an estimate, and think about product promotion. And if we see on the basis of a complete analysis of the niche that the success of the project is possible, it is inherently advertising and has the potential to scale, then implement the idea. I'll tell you right away, it's not as simple as it may seem from the outside. Do you know how many times my team members have offered to develop a mobile application for customers? At least 10, but all attempts failed. Not a single customer liked the finished app. It was not quite convenient or functional enough every time. There were some employees who thought that now we would tweak some technology and everything would be fine. But no, it was never possible to create a perfectly working application, so we gave up the idea. Yes, recognizing that at a certain stage the idea did not work is a separate skill. Being able to look at things soberly and realize that the idea did not work in this configuration is simply necessary for business development. And in general, yes, initiative is very much encouraged in our company. Let's say a client buys contextual advertising, and the manager suggests that he additionally order printing products, and he agrees. Well done for telling the customer about this opportunity, get a reward. For sales in additional directions, the employee receives an extra bonus, in addition to the prescribed percentages. By the way, thanks to this system, employees not only offer the customer more services, but also begin to understand them more deeply. For example, there is a manager who is responsible for advertising on transport. This includes buses, subways, trains, airplanes, and even cabs. In other words, the spectrum is very broad. And this manager, let's say, having received an order in his main specialty, in addition, made for the customer 200-page catalog and agreed on radio advertising. This means that in the course of working on the project, he gained new knowledge and can now offer the next client 3 areas at once. Thus, the employee not only earns more money, but also develops as a specialist. And the client, in turn, is satisfied with working with our agency. All the work is done for him on a turnkey basis in a one-stop-shop format. By the way, I will pass the floor to one of our wonderful employees who specializes in communication with clients. To be more precise, this person was in charge of cold calls, that is, outgoing initial contacts. Anton Karamzin, an employee of the Medor agency in 2009 to 2010, is currently the owner of several businesses and co-owner of the Patrick Mann brand, a chain of classic men's clothing stores. https://patrickmann.ru. I lived in Japan for a long time, came back to Russia and worked as a translator for a couple of years. Then in 2008 to 2009 there was a crisis, and it was a difficult time. My job didn't become less, but the solvency of the company I was temporarily employed by wasn't very good. I had to go on interviews in sales departments, so I ended up in an advertising agency. Now I realize that most employers do not like employees like me, too, how can I put it more accurately, independent, or something. Most do, but not Medor, with whom we literally crossed interests. I wanted to develop, and the agency needed enterprising people in the outgoing calls department who were eager to develop themselves and were willing to actively learn. The catcher and the beast, as they say. Personally, Medor gave me a very cool base of understanding of how relationships within the team are organized, what is the search for customers, fulfillment of orders, invoices, delivery notes, all the rest of the paperwork. In fact, I realized how the world works, not only the advertising world, but the world of sales in general. At first there was no client base, I collected it myself, I processed it, looked for clients. Remuneration was very simple, 50% of the profit from my sales. This is a huge percentage, by the way, the coolest conditions for self-development. In fact, I worked for myself, was a company within a company, and did not care about providing a workplace, did not worry about taxes. All this was arranged by other people for me. Convenient. All I did was call clients from morning to night. The more calls I made, the more chances I had to sell something. It was simple. But since I had no experience, it was hard at first to go from a nice conversation with a customer to financial issues. I didn't immediately realize that I should just say, "Dude, here's the bill, pay it." But over time, that came too. I was told the story of how Oleg came to the customer, threw an open backpack on the table and said, "I've come for your money." Why so? Because it is a good psychological technique, a kind of recklessness that attracts people. I did not understand it then, but now I pay attention to such tricks and practice them myself. Now I am an entrepreneur myself. I am the owner of several businesses in the clothing trade, founder of Antigo LLC, wholesale supplier of men's clothing to marketplaces, and co-founder of Patrick Mann Russia LLC, better known under the Patrick Mann brand. This is a chain of classic men's clothing stores. There are more than 10 retail stores under this brand, both owned and franchised. I work with another former Medor employee, Stanislav Ramazanov, on the Patrick Mann brand. And I use much of what Medor taught me in my daily work. So nothing has passed without a trace. We are always in touch, working, developing, and from time to time we remember the times when our steel was tempered. Stanislav Ramazanov, an employee of Medor in 2009 to 2010, is currently co-owner of the Patrick Mann brand, a chain of classic men's clothing stores, https://patrickmann.ru. By the way, it was at the Medor agency in 2009 that we met Anton Karamzin. A year later I opened my own company and invited Anton to help me. We developed various projects, websites, startups. A couple of years passed in this mode. In 2013, I went to Thailand for a year. When I came back, I immediately started looking for something to open, launch or do in Moscow. And here I came up with an idea, to sell men's suits wholesale. We started the business in the form of a wholesale company, which gradually grew into a retail company. In 2014 we opened the first store, in 2015, the second, in 2016, for at once, and in 2017, for more. And when we opened 10 more stores in 2018, our company grew into an entire chain. With Anton, we eventually became full partners. At the moment, I am co-owner of the Patrick Mappy brand working with the public sector. That's why our organization must continuously grow, our business must develop. The more we work, the more profit our clients get. Employees also develop, some within the Medor agency, and some within their own business. This result is achieved only by total immersion in working with clients, in fact, serving them. For this purpose we actively master new technologies, performance marketing, big data analysis and so on, otherwise we cannot survive in the XXI century. Such are the times at hand. By the way, speaking of the times, idlers from the capital of culture. There is an opinion that in the age of the internet a company does not need to open a representative office in another city at all. You can contact a client, for example, from Kazan by messenger, take an order and fulfill it while still in Moscow. Is that right? Yes, but not quite. In 2010, we decided to set up a representative office of the Medor agency in St. Petersburg. At that time, the number of branches of the company spoke of its status on the market. Every large organization of those years sought to develop a regional network. Remember, and those who don't remember, imagine, the website of any firm, as it looked then, there was bound to be a map of Russia with ticks and flags, we are in St. Petersburg, we are in Makhachkala, and so on. This adds credibility and image to the business in the eyes of customers. And the main thing is that people developing their business in different territories get to know the local peculiarities of the audience, logistics, and the legal system. Perhaps you have heard the story of how Mitsubishi promoted its Mitsubishi Pajero SUV on the Spanish market, but did not take into account that Pajero is a rude swear word in the customs jargon. A lot of money was lost until they realized to change the name to Montero, which translates as harmless gamekeeper. In addition, if you are going to take your business to the international level, I advise you to take into account the red days of the calendar of those territories where you plan to open a branch. Colleagues told me how they promised a client to develop a commercial proposal by tomorrow. But they did not take into account that the office of the executors, the service company with which they were cooperating, was in Ukraine. They had a public holiday that day, and no one was working. The client was let down, the deadline was not met. So, I had the idea of opening branches of the agency not just in Russia, but all over the world. It's not just about status, by the way. For example, let's imagine a situation where a large federal company, let's say IKEA, wants to run an advertising campaign that would help them reach their potential consumers in the farthest corners of our country. Which advertising agency is it more likely to turn to, located only in Moscow or represented in different regions? The answer is obvious, especially since this company will have to take into account the peculiarities of each corner of Russia. Residents of St. Petersburg think somewhat differently than people in the North Caucasus or, say, the Far East. Muscovites spend more than people from the regions, and so on. Somewhere people buy based on expediency, and for some people the aesthetic beauty of the product is more important. And when you have your own team in each region, clients will know exactly which place is better to choose for a representative office in terms of customer flow or where to place a billboard. A local employee will be able to communicate with the customer in person, in a language he or she understands, get feedback and establish a strong relationship faster. That's great. Spoiler, yes, but only on paper. So, let's go back to 2010. The first 2 attempts to organize a branch in St. Petersburg were unsuccessful. The plan was as follows: we find a suitable specialist in St. Petersburg, he comes to our head office in Moscow, is trained in the minimum necessary competencies, learns the peculiarities and principles of work in our company. And then he returns to St. Petersburg, rents an office if necessary, and begins to process the incoming flow of clients. We, in turn, advertise the new branch and redirect calls from those wishing to receive our services in the northern capital to it. A perfect plan, if you think about it. What could have gone wrong? Lesson 1, don't measure the competence of others by yourself. Put me in the bathroom, just give me a telephone and access to the internet, and that's it, calls and orders will flow, and money will flow with them. But, unfortunately, not all people are so organized. Summarizing the results of a month of work of a new branch, we found that the person on the spot clearly failed to cope with the tasks. We gave him the promised salary and said goodbye. We found a new director. A month later, a client calls, who was looking for an advertising agency in St. Petersburg to place ads in print publications, one of which was the newspaper, Center Plus. Our branch director, instead of acting as a full-fledged intermediary in minimizing the interaction between the client and the contractor, sent him, directly to this very Center Plus. The customer was annoyed. He had turned to an advertising agency to get both the service of placement on several advertising platforms and competent positioning in one place. Not to call managers of dozens of newspapers and magazines independently, but to work with one person who would solve all the issues. I listened to the client's claims, thanked him, hung up the phone and went to the train station. I bought a ticket to St. Petersburg. I came to the branch and personally fired the director. At the same time I found out that at the end of 30 days of probationary period he had made only one sale for $70. Not only that, that director had hired managers who were absolutely illiterate in Russian. Would you want to cooperate with people who make a mistake in literally every word? Rhetorical question. Of course, I asked the employee, at that moment already former, what was the reason for such an irresponsible approach to his duties. His answer could well be published in a separate book called Encyclopedia of Excuses. Although personally I am sure that if a person persistently fails to fulfill his direct job duties, there can be only 3 reasons. He's an incompetent employee. He's an outright pest. He is an excellent specialist and an honest worker, he is simply not in his place. Most likely, he is just in the wrong team, in the wrong position or in the wrong organization. In short, that director was the only employee in 15 years of my business practice who was not paid. And no, 2 weeks, I simply asked him to leave immediately. I think he deserved it. All the more so because in the course of working with thousands of customers, we have noticed that about 2% of customers are ready to buy a product or service as soon as they see the offer. That is, if, for example, you give people the opportunity to make their own invoices on your site, then out of 100 visitors, 2 will take advantage of this, paying immediately. This means that at least 2 sales out of a possible 100 will happen without the manager's involvement. But the head of the branch in St. Petersburg did not even do this. Don't get me wrong, I'm not complaining, things happen in business. I just want you to feel our attitude to business. Medor staff has never tolerated such passengers and will not tolerate them in the future. And if the director did not actually work, what kind of salary can we talk about? It's simple, if there is a result, there is money. No result, well, you know. You can't consider one single transaction for a symbolic sum as the result of work of the whole branch for a month, can you? As a result, we started looking for a new, third director. Having moved to St. Petersburg, I personally conducted the interviews, getting fully involved in the process. The ideal candidate for that position in our mind was as follows: a person with experience in advertising, who had already achieved certain results in the industry. Plus, he had previously held the position of a project, agency or publication manager. I described the conditions under which the interview of the potential director took place in the beginning of the book. 2 people were suitable for the position based on their competencies. We chose one of them, and everything seemed to be fine, but after a while it turned out that we had made another mistake. Although it seemed that the new branch director was a deeply believing Christian, engaged in charity work. Decent, honest, and hardworking, could such a church-going man turn out to be a slacker, a cheat, or a pest? You want another spoiler? I'll bet you're already guessing. Long story short, it went like this. As it turns out later, people who are fanatically devoted to a religion have their own quirks. For example, some of them divide others on the principle of one's own, another's. And if anything is not according to the dogma of their religion, you are a stranger. This is not conducive to a productive work process, believe me. I didn't notice it at first. And imagine my surprise when I was informed that the director of the office in St. Petersburg regularly lectured the employees on religion, meddled in their personal affairs that had nothing to do with work, thus violating the personal boundaries of the team members. Apparently he did not remember the Christian principle, judge not, lest ye be judged. Marina, why do you spend so much time with Vasily? He is married. Does his wife know about it? These were the kind of phrases people heard from him every day. Not only that, he made it a rule to hire only those who were officially married. In my opinion, that's just unprofessional. Why do you care who lives/sleeps/dates with whom? There are different people working in our Moscow office. Who sees whom, how and in what places my employees spend their weekends is none of my business. The main thing is that on Monday they should all be at their workplaces in a cheerful mood and perform their duties perfectly. That's it. It wasn't the principal's moralizing that was the main problem, though. I was betting on the fact that satisfied St. Petersburg clients would eventually cooperate with the main office in Moscow, but it didn't happen. The idea was for the top customers to sort of rise from the regional level to the central office, but it turned out differently. The St. Petersburg branch turned into a separate, feudal principality. They say that we are Peter and you are Moscow, you do it this way and we do it differently. This is certainly not the way it should be. It's time to sort things out again and correct the situation manually. It was also bloody. The farewell was particularly difficult, but for all the mistakes of creating and launching an office in the northern capital, we nevertheless gained valuable experience. Over 8.5 years, the St. Petersburg branch did bring in some income. The employees developed new competencies, and acquired their own client base. Now the office in St. Petersburg works in franchise format and brings in more money than the independent branch it used to be. At the same time, we have no problems with directors and no reputational losses. Everything has gotten better. Albeit at great cost, but the main thing is that there is a result. Surprisingly, with the transition to partnership relations, I no longer have the feeling that the St. Petersburg and Moscow offices are separate feudal principalities. I am not worried that we will be thrown away, left to float free with the team and the clients. That is why franchising, in my opinion, is a convenient system of business development. This practice of expanding our advertising agency is definitely worth continuing. At this point, I would like to pass the floor to the person who worked for us as our franchising director. Oleg Kruglov, a former employee of Medor, is now a successful entrepreneur. I already had quite a lot of experience in franchising when one day I came across a website with advertisements, and there I learned about a vacancy at Medor. True, it turned out that there were enough other responsibilities besides franchising. In any case, I learned that companies can be set up far differently than I've been used to seeing over the years. At Medor, there is a complete lack of intrigue, where people suck up to each other, someone loses their job because of it, even though they have a family to feed and a mortgage to pay. This was very impressive and spoke about the fact that the team is healthy. You can get a desired position or a new work direction thanks to your knowledge and competencies, and it has nothing to do with how many people you trample over, for the sake of it. When entering the subculture of the Medor agency, a person should realize that he or she has been accepted into the so-called big family, in order to develop. And the employee's development vector will always coincide with the company's development vector. In Medor there are no restrictions, the agency does not build barriers, on the contrary, it moves in all directions that bring income and develop competencies. That is, the company is very innovative in terms of human resources management. Although one should not mistake this freedom for chaos and politeness for weakness. I will tell you more about how the work with franchise buyers, i.e. the so-called franchisees, is organized. A lot of interesting things await you there too. Business in the Sochi way. After opening a branch in St. Petersburg, we thought about promoting in Nizhny Novgorod, pocket of Russia, after all. To make the final decision, I interviewed the staff. Although I myself have always believed that relying on the opinion of some individual people, who are not even experts, is not even yesterday's day, but the Stone Age. Some of our clients sinned by saying that my chief accountant, friend, classmate, mother, advised me to choose such and such a promotion channel. We show them figures, analytics, coverage, cases, and in response we hear, on the new Riga is a gorgeous TV screen. Here on it my advertising should be given. And that's it. Or even, I want the same advertisement for my plumbing as in the village where I bought the land. And what do you do with such people? I don't know. The fact is that I myself briefly became such, always believed in the team and decided to make a collegial decision. I didn't have figures and analytics at my fingertips, so instead of looking for them, I consulted my employees. An employee of the accounting department who came from Nizhny Novgorod said, "This is a depressed region. There is nothing to catch there." Taking her word for it, I cooled down towards Nizhny Novgorod and got a new idea, Sochi. Not only was it warm there, but at that time preparations for the Olympics were underway, and the government was investing huge sums of money in the region. But, the question immediately arose, what then, when the sporting holiday was over? And while it was possible to more or less predict how business would develop in St. Petersburg or another major city, nothing was clear about Sochi, because it was nowhere near the capital. We needed objective and up-to-date information to understand whether it was worth expanding business in this direction. By the way, I can recommend you an inexpensive way to scout the situation in a new region. I marked a point on the map on my website, signed, I opened a branch in Sochi, got a Sochi city phone number, forwarded it to my cell phone, advertised it and started catching calls. I answered myself, recorded every conversation, analyzed it. In other words, he completely found out the needs of customers in that region. Following our script, he asked what advertising campaigns had already been conducted, and why they were stopped, what customers were waiting for the result, and so on. Then eventually I traveled to Sochi myself, met with one of the clients. And what conclusions did I come to? The advertising market, of course, in Sochi there is, but our managers at that time would not have been able to build relationships with clients there, too demanding these people. For example, in Moscow, many customers want to receive all services, turnkey, and they do not care that some of the work can be done somewhat cheaper by another contractor. On the contrary, Muscovites agree to pay 15% above the average price, just to find everything they need in one place. In Sochi, it's the opposite. At that time, the vast majority of clients were fighting for every $20, constantly looking for where it was cheaper, and haggling hard. Maybe this is the right approach if we are talking about a specific product. But we are selling services. What is the fundamental difference? The goods will not sell cheaper than the cost price, because it is clearly defined. But in the case of services, in many cases, the bottom line of the price is not clearly defined. There is always someone who does approximately the same thing for less money. However, I have the impression that it will not be easy to get even the smallest sum from Sochi residents, natives and residents of this beautiful city, if you are reading these lines. In business communication with them, it is difficult to escape the very unmistakable feeling, they are trying to fool me. In Moscow, we do business with some clients in the following way: if you don't like something, you don't have to pay. What is characteristic? The cases when the result does not suit a Moscow customer are very rare. That is, in fact, no one has ever used this opportunity. We have not had any unpaid invoices in Moscow. But in Sochi, as it seemed to me at the time, clients operate on a different principle: if I really like it, I will pay, but otherwise don't expect any money. I realized that when we opened a branch in Sochi, we would quickly get bogged down in endless litigation and beating money out of both clients and performers. To be fair, some Sochi residents, with whom I was able to talk, had already asked for an invoice for advertising services and were ready to pay it. I explained it to them. We are not yet working with Sochi, we are only conducting preliminary market research. When we have news, we will announce it separately. After all, we can't just take and invest $3 million in a new branch in a region unknown to us, fly to Sochi regularly to monitor the work of our representative office and then find out that it isn't profitable. We would have lost both money and time, our clients and the local staff we hired. It is much better to talk to 20 potential customers for 20 to 40 minutes, to understand whether we should enter this region, and then make a final decision, to invest money or not. So I made my decision: we are not going to Sochi. I apologized to my telephone interlocutors and asked them to understand me, because they themselves, as entrepreneurs, would hardly throw themselves into an uncharted maelstrom. And even though some of the failed clients in Sochi were indignant, you bet, we communicated, but the result was nil. We are still practicing the pre-exploration approach. It can be applied not only in our field, but also in any other field. Let's say you want to set up a business selling certain goods, buy, let's say, tourist equipment in China and sell it in Russia. I advise you to create a simple site, hang on it an ad for the sale of backpacks and kettles, that is, to give a little advertising. When, and if, people start calling you, wanting to buy the proposed products, explain to them that at the moment they are out of stock. Apologize for wasting your customers' time, and recommend where they can buy similar backpacks and other items, or, if you've already decided you're still starting up, offer to put them on a waiting list. This is how you research the market. Believe me, it's better than investing money blindly, and then, stepping over a pile of bowler hats and hatchets that filled the office, tearing your hair out that it didn't work out. By the way, if you will be in Sochi, pay attention to how many unfinished buildings there are, left by entrepreneurs who went into the water without knowing the wade. So, the experiment showed that Sochi is still a difficult region for us. We would have to travel there frequently, constantly monitor the branch and delve into every transaction. The clients there are dodgy, and their approach of buying cheap and squeezing the last juices out of the supplier did not suit us. So we didn't open a branch in that city. Instead, we ended up with something else. It's easier to buy than to steal. How do you know if your company is successful? Fraudsters are acting on your behalf, competitors are trying to steal technology. In 2014, our website was completely copied. Twice. There appeared regional, so to speak, Medors that have nothing to do with us. And under the guise of our agency, they started selling services. Of course, no one was going to work out contracts. Clients deceived by fraudsters called us. I paid your Lviv representatives. Now they do not contact me. Fulfill the order or return the money. And we had to explain that we do not have and have never had a branch in Ukraine. At first, of course, a little bit pleased my ego. That's how cool we are, that they copy us. Soon there was only irritation. Yes, bitch, what is it? Fame is good, but why the hell is someone using our signboard and reputation for their own enrichment without permission? All this eventually hits us. For comparison, here is another situation. At some point other advertising agencies began to show interest in us. Their owners asked me personally for advice on building and running their businesses. For example, they were interested in how to build a distribution department and a motivation system for the sales department. What to do if people in shoulder straps suddenly come to the head office. How to react to tax inspections. Why advertising in general does not work. In general, standard questions of entrepreneurs. That is, the person called and without offense said, "Sorry, I am your competitor, I like the way you do business, and I want to learn how to do business from you." I think this strategy is more honest than if he had tried to steal our work. For example, he would have come for an interview, lied that he was an effective employee, we would have hired him. After that he would have copied our entire knowledge base in a month or two and, happy, would have run to screw it to his business. I'll tell you a secret, to steal a business strategy, you need to put a lot of effort into it. That's why it's more profitable to buy consultations from specialists. Many people realize this and turn to me for this kind of help. In short, after thinking it over, we decided to allow everyone to legally work under the Medor sign. That is, we started offering franchises of our agency for a small fee. The idea was to give buyers access to the gigantic knowledge base that we build and keep up to date. How and where to look for sales managers, what are the criteria for their selection, examples of test jobs, scripts and conversions along the sales funnel, and even the form of application to couriers and much more, we collected in a separate repository. And now all this information could be openly and legally purchased to quietly apply it to develop your business. We detailed our commercial offer, what exactly the franchisee receives when paying for it, our business model, the technologies we use, and so on. We recorded a YouTube video on how to join the franchise. We gave an advertisement with a link to the section of our website where all the materials, including the video, are located. And if the guest is interested in the offer, he can ask additional questions. And there were a lot of questions. We collected them, prepared answers, and structured them, thus forming a knowledge base, for ourselves as well. All this valuable fund is very useful when new recruits come to the agency and it is necessary to quickly introduce them to their positions and familiarize them with the specifics of their work. Both managers and employees can find in this database all the necessary information about our agency's business processes. Convenient. As a result, entrepreneurs from different cities began to contact us to become representatives of the agency Medor. There were more and more people who wanted to work with us, and at some point it became clear that it was no longer profitable to work with them for a small price. Therefore, we raised the monthly payments of the representative offices, not very much, up to $1,500. At the same time, for those partners who managed to enter the program on the initial terms, we kept the same, low level of payments to us. Thus we have new points on the map: Magnitogorsk, Chelyabinsk, Vladivostok. At the same time, 18 representative offices worked on the franchise at its peak. Of course, without conflicts with partners did not do without. Some entrepreneurs took the position, I pay you, and you provide us with a working business. But we were not going to provide additional service at a loss to ourselves. And frankly speaking, providing franchises was more to pad our ego than to increase our income. For profit growth, it was such a bad idea. Earlier we had an ambitious idea, to open branches in all 85 regions of Russia, as well as in the CIS countries, and then in key cities around the world. In total, according to our plan, there were to be 200 Medor agency outlets around the globe, which would eventually become a network of friendly companies and help each other in their own regions. For example, some Dr. Levin from the USA decides to enter the Russian market. He is looking for someone to entrust with advertising support for his business and sees, wow. Medor has offices in New York, Warsaw, and Moscow. Of course, I will go to them. Russian franchisees could tell us about themselves, each in their own region. And we will tell them exactly where to place themselves so that the whole city can see the client's advertising, on what billboards, TV channels, etc. Or maybe it would be more effective to draw graffiti on some popular spot where the whole city hangs out. Taking into account all the local nuances increases the output of advertising and, accordingly, customer satisfaction. Well, is that a good idea? Not a damn thing. At least not yet. So why did this brilliant idea, to open 200 offices, fail to materialize? Our strategic mistake was that we set the franchise fee too low. We have repeatedly noticed that when people pay pennies for a product or service, they treat it irresponsibly. Then the customer's demands grow, and next time they ask for more for even less money. To put it simply, at some point it became clear that there was no porridge to be made here. The dream of world domination by Medor Corporation had to be put on hold. Who knows, maybe we'll come back to it later. Anyway, we're still selling the franchise. What does its buyer get? First, the right to use the Medor trademark. But he, as our official representative, must abide by 4 rules. No cheating customers, no cheating employees, no cheating contractors. And lastly, stay in touch, answer calls and requests. If these rules are violated, we, without compensating anything, part ways. That is, as soon as any hustling occurs, we say, goodbye. Because reputational risks are much more important than any money. Take your honor before your time, as a famous literary hero used to say. Yes, we have repeatedly encountered the situation, a client calls a representative office, but they do not pick up the phone and do not call back. Then the person puts not only the regional branch of our company, but also the whole Medor as such on his personal blacklist and never contacts any of our offices again. That is, the negative image of one of the branches spreads like a virus through the organism to the entire network and ruins the image of the company as a whole. It is easy to find out about violations of franchise conditions. Clients periodically complain to the head office, and we ourselves monitor the quality of the network's work. If the quality of work does not meet our corporate criteria, then it is time to say goodbye to such a subscriber. That's the whole focus. Now we are quite satisfied with the interaction with franchisees and see their respectful attitude towards us as partners. These people really understand what they are paying royalties for. In any case, the main conclusion that can be drawn from this story is that nowadays business is less about an office that is intentionally tied to a point on a map. It's primarily about the website and the technology used. More and more information is in cloud storage, projects are successfully run by outsourced teams. As a result, internet giants like Facebook can have a sales team located anywhere in the world. The main thing is to keep employees, customers and contractors happy. Chapter